All right. So we'll call the audit committee meeting to order Wednesday, the 22nd of May, 3 o'clock. Public comment, seeing none. Tony, I'll turn it over to you, I guess, or Brian, do you want to say something?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So back, I think it was in March, I think it might have been, or November actually, when we met with the audit committee to go through the management letter and present the proposed engagement letter. There had been a request from the audit committee to change the in-charge partner on the audit when we extended the engagement. So Tony, who the audit committee is familiar with, is here, and Terenzio will now be the partner in charge of the audit. So we wanted to bring him to the audit committee. They are going to the select board tonight as well.
Great.
But we wanted to bring them, so I'll let Tony say a few words, and then if Terenzio wants to.
Yeah, so Terenzio has done some work for the town of Nantucket, but it's been limited to the airport. So I thought it was an ideal rotation situation where he had some familiarity with the island and the town, but had not done really anything other than the airport, hadn't worked on really anything else. So Terenzio's been with the firm for about 12 years?
About 12 years,
12 years. And he's got a background from the Big Four, Deloitte & Touche. He worked for Deloitte & Touche. He's ventured out into a bunch of different SEC startup type things. He's got a very, very good background. Came into municipal without a lot of experience, but the curve was quick. He learned a lot. He's a very good asset, has been a very good asset for the firm. And I feel comfortable turning over the reins to him as the partner in charge. And I will still be concurring and doing other things with the engagement, but Terenzio will be the main.
Great.
The main.
Great. Well, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all.
And thanks for acceding to our wishes to do a change in the audit partner as we re-engaged you guys for, what, an additional 3 years?
Yes, that's correct.
So, nice work over the past 3 years, so.
Six.
Six? It's been that long?
Yeah. Goes by quick, doesn't it?
I think so. Anyway.
So the next thing, Mr. Chairman, we just wanted to let the audit committee know that obviously Tony and Terenzio are here, but the rest of some of the other staff from Roselli, Clark and Associates is here. We're doing interim field work this week, laying the groundwork, going through some of the walkthrough and the testing. We try to get as much of that done as possible this week. The plan is, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, but the plan is that the last week of September, they'll be here to do the audit. The goal is to have the CAFR and the financials completely drafted, signed off on by the second week of October like we did last year, so that if we go to market in November, we'll be able to have that completely final and ready to present to Moody's. And I think we had the management letter at least outlined and able to have some brief discussions a lot sooner than the 2 years ago. So the goal is to continue to stay on that same exact timeline. So far
Great.
This week, I mean, they've been here since Monday. It seems to be going well so far, and the goal is internally is moving forward and getting everything prepared to be closed, and then turning all that documentation over to them in September for the audit.
Terrific.
So I had on here, Mr. Chairman, the fixed asset continued discussion because the last time that we had met, we had talked about the recommendation with regard to the threshold that we were capitalizing assets for, which is currently $5,000, which is a lot of work and something that Tony suggested that we maybe could think about changing. We had discussed with the audit committee the recommendation of going to 25,000, and we had kind of tabled what we were going to do until we talked about some of the questions about what were we going to do with stuff below 25,000. So internally, the assistant town accountant Bob Dickinson and I have talked, and I've talked about this with Tony as well, is We would propose being only capitalizing assets over 25,000. What we would do is we will download, I think there's over 1,000 assets less than $25,000 in the system right now. We would download them into an Excel sheet, and we will still maintain those assets. They just won't be capitalized, and any future ones will be added to that. And over the next 12 months, we'll begin exploring with IT an actual inventory software program to manage this. But during that time, my staff right now has been going to every department and physically viewing assets that are on the ledger, and we will add this piece of the less than 25 to that procedure that we're doing, and we'll randomly select those. And we don't tell any of the departments what we're going to look at. We just tell them we're coming, and they've haphazardly selected a list, and we will add that part of the process to this to try to the best of our ability, alleviate some of the concern that the audit committee had in terms of what we would do to maintain or to verify those.
Right. So just so that I understand you, you're proposing to expense anything under 25,000?
Yeah, which is what, yes,
And I assume our policy has been to expense anything under 5.
it has been, yes. So hopefully that would addresses some of the concern that you had about how we would continue to maintain them and track them and alleviate some of that. So, and I do know that in both Robin and Bob's travels to the departments, some of the departments do have lists of these inventory items, and one of these goals is to also encompass this into, you know, the parts that we maintain for the fleet vehicles, and the water company maintains a list of inventory. And as part of a more encompassing and all encompassing approach, we would add testing and verifying what they're listing as having inventory into the visual inspection of the assets over the $25,000 threshold.
And do you have, I'm sure you have some idea of what percentage of assets are going to, of total assets are going to drop out?
The total assets are about $500 million. So those less than 25,000 is going to be a very, very small, from a gap standpoint, is going to be a very, very small portion of that $500 million. From a control standpoint, maintaining Excel spreadsheets off to the side. What was happening with the asset program that they were using is, I mean, there were assets on there for $108, $118, you know, like some really, you know, when we try to do a filter.
And that's not the depreciated value?
Yeah, no, I think there might have been one for $1.80.
There was one for $1.80.
Yeah, $1.80. So I'm like,
That was-
Brian,
yeah.
this is, we're going to have a fixed asset thing like this, and you folks are building a lot more. So from a gap perspective, it's important to be within a material range. But from an inventory control perspective, you still need to know, are the vehicles down at the police station? Does the public works still have,
Sure.
you know, their assets, or are they walking away or whatever? And that's being resolved through this Excel spreadsheet.
Well, the Excel is to start with now, and then over the course of, you know, meeting with IT, we will work towards implementing a software-based solution that we could import this into. And it'll do like I'm used to in the private sector, spit out every quarter a cycle count of various inventory to make sure that it still exists. And that's what we will work to moving towards. That obviously will not be able to be implemented for June 30th, but that's the next step in this process of doing this. But in that interim, the way that I propose to solve the problem of making sure that we can still count them is, because we have a process in place of physically and visually inspecting and the assets over 25,000 that we've been doing now, we would just add that as part of a procedure for each department to physically inspect some of these items on that list.
Any discrepancies showing up?
You know, when we sit down with the departments to actually like go through the list that we've given them, we'll come across things that have changed in the last few months. For instance, we got rid of this copier and got this new copier. It's stuff like that, and it's just it's very useful to go to the departments and actually sit down with people who are in charge of their capital assets and say, this is what we physically have for the audit, and we just go through the list that way.
Right.
But you know, the discrepancies are few and far between. They're
And you guys are happy with this approach?
Yes.
Looking at you, because you're the one we'll be asking a year from now or 6 months from now.
I'll be digging much deeper into that. That's okay.
Great, great. Yeah.
And I think
Any questions, Matt?
the only other, I guess we could talk about as part of the 19 audit discussion, it was part of this letter, or this management letter relative to the NRTA, but they have successfully moved all of their insurance away from the town. So all of their property, casualty, liability insurances are all moved. And we've talked to them about the possibility of them taking over payroll, but that may be a slightly broader and longer conversation. But they have started the process and have moved their insurances. They've gone out and procured it on their own. So they will not be on the town's, those policies any longer.
Do you, refresh me, do we charge NERDA for payroll services or not?
No.
Okay.
We charge them for all the insurance, the general
Sure,
and everything. We bill them back for that, but that was the first step
Okay.
that they wanted to accomplish, so we agreed with them on that.
Do we have any exposure if they hire somebody else to insure and it's not going well? Is it back to us anyway, or?
No, they've been removed from our policies. They could, if it didn't go well, they could ask to come back, I suppose, and we would have a discussion about whether it made sense to do that or not. But once they move, they've moved. And the only exposure that we would have if there was an ongoing claim that was filed, yeah.
What if there's a serious claim and this company is?
Well, I can tell you that the effective date was yesterday, so, and they haven't been involved in any claims to my knowledge, so they all go through me, so I don't think we have any exposure from that perspective.
Did you review their
No.
policies or anything like that?
No. That was up to their administrator to determine. She consulted with an insurance consultant, I believe, to determine
Okay.
what their threshold and level of need was. I honestly didn't really want to be part of that discussion because I didn't want it to come back in case it wasn't right.
Okay.
Brian, along those lines, the library, does the library have any sort of that going on with the town, or are they completely?
They're completely
on their own?
separate.
Okay.
We don't have any affiliation with, or they don't have any insurance through us. We make a quarterly payment to them as budgeted and
And they insure
and
their own
approved, and
building and the
they
whole
insure
thing?
their own building and take care of that, yes. So that's all I had, Mr.
Anything
Chairman.
else here that you've been working on that's worth discussing?
Well, we continue to, in the stagnant revenue balances, we continue to look at them and recoup as we can. The interest rate reminder will probably have to be picked up again when the new treasurer starts on June 3rd. There's been a little bit of making sure that everything, the priorities have been being able to be done in terms of processing payroll and AP. We're still working on Nantucket Electric. I don't know that will maybe come to fruition before the end of the year, but I'm not entirely positive. The bank accounts, we will sit down and discuss with the new treasurer when she's here, and let her figure out how she wants to do that. I can tell you that, with relation to the comment about the ambulance fund, we have done an analysis and we have transferred out of the ambulance fund everything except what was in the fund balance. So we brought that bank account down to fund balance plus anything that had come in the last few days, to make sure to be able to cover expenses. But we did take care of that part of that comment, so that has been done. The unauthorized signer, which was during the transition, that has been taken care of. And
Would you normally go, would somebody normally go back and test on this, or will you pick it up in the audit?
the unauthorized signer,
Yeah.
they'll get a
We'll
list
pick
when
that up.
they'll pick it up during the conference.
Generally, we make an inquiry with the banks who are the authorized signers, and they will provide it for us. That is as of that day that they complete the confirmation, though,
Okay.
assuming that they respond to that.
Accrued sick and vacation is being worked on, but it's an arduous process to go through every individual employee to verify and go through the piece by piece like we really kind of need to. we have a consultant who has helped us update the munis tables, and we'll be implementing that piece of it so that those are tying to the new contracts, and we've reviewed it and made sure that the accruals are accruing forward correctly, but some of the balances that are negative in there are going to take a little bit longer to go through and modify and rectify.
So your forward accruals are okay, you're not so sure about,
Because some of
Looking
these
back-
we're talking about long before I even arrived that we
Sure.
have to go through to figure out. So we're working on trying to sort through it, but it's not something that is going to happen overnight to fix. It'll take a while to go through everyone to make sure.
in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not material, but it may be for certain entities, right?
Well, the majority of where the issue resides is essentially in the general fund. The airport isn't really, I don't think there's none that were noted there. It's the
Well, and they're
majority.
trying to deal with their
Yeah.
problem by their,
Right, so the majority of
fund.
the exposure lies within the general fund
yeah.
itself. And, you know, we have, I think
Hello there.
the accrued time leave, the leave is probably, I think it's close to $500,000 or $600,000 or $700,000 of dollars. And there's not a lot of those employees, there's a small handful, but it's a long period for a lot of them to go through to figure out where the change happened.
And this, I assume, includes all the enterprise funds in addition to the airport. So have you looked at the Island Home?
We actually do look, the Island Home is actually probably is in pretty good shape because the Island Home director compares the time system that they use to Munis, and it's updated and matched and reflected and changed on an ongoing basis. So it's not really, I think it's not really a big risk there. It's more some longtime employees that do reside in operations within the general fund itself.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that the liability itself, we do a year-to-year comparison, so the problem is more individually, is it correct? And are they
Right.
correct, and how far back do we go? That's, in and of itself, is not really material if it's off a little bit. So we do an analysis, and we've got it going back to 2013 from year to year. And from a reasonable standpoint, it's just extra work what they have to go through to create the schedule and put it together for us. And that's what you're trying to work on, just to make that easier.
Yeah.
But the number itself, once it's done, is within a material amount of where we believe it should be.
Okay.
And the last being old personal property receivable balances. We've worked through motor vehicle and boat, and we're working through personal property to identify which years we can essentially remove from receivable and deferred revenue, because they're likely not collectible and there's no real way to collect those under the statute. You can't lien it, so it just sits there.
But on things like boats, if
Boats
they
ag-
have
boats again.
mooring
Well, if we had
permits?
the town potentially has something there based on the town code, but if they don't have a mooring, I have no ability. The same
I
thing
got
with-
that, but
Yeah,
mooring's probably worth more than most people's boats these days. so-
yes. So if they have a mooring or a slip and they had unpaid boat excise, we could, but I do know that the police department and the marine department, the harbor master, do check that when people want moorings
Okay.
and slips. So any outstanding boat excise is probably somebody that doesn't have a slip or a mooring, and we really have no other alternative to be able to get it. Or they may not even own the boat and never told anyone. So,
Great. And I know, I'm sure we've covered this before, but as far as the depth of audits of our general, or of our enterprise funds, you look at, are you looking at those?
they go through the same rigorous process that the general fund goes through.
Okay.
They're included in all of that testing, and there's no difference between enterprise funds and general fund. It's all, they go through the same rigorous review and
Well, it's in the
analysis.
same system.
It's in the same
The
system.
system's
so,
all the
yeah.
same. It's just a matter of, are the allocations proper?
Well, I would think that the the airport having a separate audit is probably has an even higher degree of audit attention because it's going to have a much lower materiality than the town.
Right. Same with the water company, right? So they run their own, still running their own audits separately or not?
They have something done, but it's not, we are, due to timing, we don't actually actively participate or receive the material from the firm that they're using, because it doesn't impact us, because our firm needs to have the data out of our actual system, not something compiled by another audit firm. So it's, and the timing of when they start to put it together conflicts with my getting the close done and getting information to our auditors. So we very rarely, if ever, have participated in providing or working with it.
Right.
And Dave, it's not like years ago, the town hired us to go in and look at it more operationally. I think we did the SOAR fund way back, like 2014. So we don't go to that level. We do it just from a financial statement level. We do test controls and whatnot, but we don't go dig down deep into the operations. Other than the airport, which is a standalone.
Standalone, yeah.
Any questions about this scintillating subject?
Not at the moment. I think I missed most of the meeting.
This is Don. This is Terenzio.
Yeah.
Hi, it's nice
He's
to
going to
meet
be he's going to be taking over as the lead partner.
Yep.
So we just thought it would be a good idea to come down today.
And Don is the chair of our select
Select
board.
board, yes.
So she'll meet him tonight too, so.
Yeah.
Tonight I'll wear a tie.
Okay, I won't.
So Mr.
I think
Chair-
the only, just for Don's benefit, because I think the decisions on capitalizing items,
she was, yes, Dawn was here for the original discussion, so.
yeah, so I'm going to move forward. Anything north of 25 gets capitalized.
Okay,
South of 25 gets expensed,
okay,
and that's up from the 5,000
okay.
below.
But we have implemented, we're going to add testing of those particular items to the visual inspection of the fixed assets that we do above 25,000. Like we already are doing it, and we'll just add that as a component to it to ensure that we do see them and they don't get, I know the concern was they get lost and they get forgotten about. And so internally we talked about how's the best way to handle this. And this is then over the course of the next, hopefully 9 to 12 months, I would say we will work with IT on hopefully procuring an inventory package that will allow us to put these all into something that will maintain them versus maintaining them on a manual spreadsheet for right now. So that is the plan and the goal to drive towards for us.
So speaking of inventory, and I guess it would come up mostly with sewer and maybe the water company, what they keep on hand for inventory and spare parts. At what point does that age out? Or maybe said another way, are they, in your opinions, carrying excess inventory, which might, 2 years from now, the parts are no longer usable, or I don't know how much stuff gets stored outside, but, you have
Do you mean like just parts and
parts or whatever else that
Supplies
they
and
put into inventory,
hydrants, meters, things like
meters
that?
and stuff like that.
Copper.
We haven't actually gone down there and observed the inventory. That might be something we could do while we're here in
Well,
October.
without having the details, again, being very fresh with this, the question is are they recorded on the books? Or have those been expended as essentially supplies?
I've never seen them recorded.
If they're
no.
not on the books, then they would be just part of the normal expenditure testing
Yeah.
that we do. Really, they carry no book value for financial statement purposes, but you're right, there is a significant amount of value. With respects to the water department, your significant risk is that the water meters themselves those do have lives. Generally, when they're stored, the lives, there's no water running through them, so you would think that the mechanisms would work, but these things are all radio frequency, so that does limit their life cycle,
But they get turned over fairly,
Generally, they're on
because they have a
rotation
lot of
plan.
new connections, and they've been they change out water meters
you
on a
need to change
regular
out the water
basis, so.
meters, because otherwise it's the only way to get real
They do the
accurate water.
run meters as well.
Pardon me?
They do the run meters as
Yes.
well, that they sell for like around 700 to separate off your sprinklers.
Yes.
Those are probably consumed at a timely basis.
I mean, we can definitely.
We can add it.
One of the
Add it
biggest,
as a
yeah,
audit
one of the
step.
biggest inventories that the town has is fuel at the airport. And that is inventory, that is tested, that is a significant balance.
The Jet A stuff.
Exactly, your jet fuel.
I would imagine that's pretty regular, just for no other reason to make sure there are no leaks in the tanks.
Yes, they have, yeah, exactly, they do
Either
keep track of it.
Human or,
And the folks out there actually understand how to, Jamie, having been a former auditor herself, kind of puts it on a silver platter for us, but it's all laid out correctly. All the costing is done on a FIFO basis, first in, first out basis, in accordance with GAAP.
good. You're good.
Unless there's anything that you want to update me on that I missed.
What leverage do you have with the national grid of the bank? If we're gonna meet with them, set up a meeting and try to sort that out, what leverage do we have?
I'm not entirely sure what leverage we have. I think that, the leverage might be from,
Sorry, we can't move your polls until we get this sorted out.
I don't know if you actually have that leverage or not.
Yeah.
We might want some of those polls moved.
Yeah.
I don't know, honestly, but,
I'm just saying, it's something to think about. Because if this has been ongoing
And then that's a slippery slope just because it's in someone else's FID number. And the regulations are really strict. But it got,
It's been turned over to the state abandoned property at this point, either.
the bank, well, because the bank is sending you the statement, you're opening it. So it's not like it's
There's
being.
no activity.
It's,
I'm surprised.
well, I think it's a CD that's renewing every month.
Oh, that's.
is that what it is, a CD?
It's a CD, I think, that renews every month. And I'm not entirely sure why we're getting the statement since it's in National Grid's Fed ID number.
And National Grid says it's not theirs.
Yeah, nobody wants to take.
I'll take it.
We'll happily take ownership of it, but I don't know, we're not entirely sure how to yet. The bank is, we have talked to the bank and not gotten very far, so.
Do you know the
Been
start date
struggling with
of
this for a while.
This has been on here for a while.
1993.
the 93? So it would be something in connection with 93.
Yeah.
So you probably have to go back and.
Truthfully, this is a project that I'm going to give to our new treasurer, who's the custodian of funds and who will be responsible for figuring out how to get this into the town's hands and under our Fed ID number.
Oh, the new treasurer, by the way, we're familiar with Mindy from another town that we had done audits for, and I think you've got a great candidate, and it's going to work out really well.
Good.
Just wanted to throw
What
that
town,
out there.
what town is she coming from?
Southbridge.
Southbridge. And she'll be starting on June 3rd,
Great.
so.
Good deal. Anything else?
Well, with Terenzio on board, it's going to be a much more exciting letter next year.
Good. Management letters are,
Mine used to be exciting, wasn't it?
as much as you hate to see the opportunities for improvement or recommendations, since I fight in other board positions to have a totally clean management letter, actually, I've grown to appreciate the wisdom and the insight that's provided. So,
Yeah, in a place this large, I mean, this is a big operation. There's a lot of moving parts. you're never going to have 100% control of it. It's just not going to happen. So there's always going to be something that comes up, and that's not a slight on anybody. It's just fact that, hey, we pointed out to you, you know. And
Not only that, the regulations and the GASB rules have been changing at virtually light speed, and it's become very, very difficult to keep pace with them.
Well, notwithstanding those comments, we do hold Brian to that standard of, to the higher standard of excellence, so.
So do we.
Thank you. So what we will do is, in September, when we get through the audit, and the CAFR's done, we'll sit down with Terenzio, and determine when we can, have the management letter, you know, ready to be able to sit down and talk. We'll continue to try to do it as soon as possible. I think we did it earlier because we didn't think there weren't any issues with single audit and end of year, right? That
no,
everything
we
had been
actually
identified.
we had the single audit
Right.
done.
Right. So
In the end of year report, you report the findings in the
there.
end of year report. So.
So the goal would certainly be to meet the same time frame of, I think it was late, sometime in November, December when we did it. So we'll try to meet the same time frame again this year.
Great,
So,
terrific.
okay.
Well, Terenzio, thank you for stepping up, and
Oh, my pleasure.
look forward to working with you.
Is
Tony,
tonight-
thank you.
Is tonight to go over everything like we did here, or just an
No,
introduction?
it's just an
Very,
introduction.
Very quick introduction? Okay, perfect.
Or just an introduction.
Just an
Because
introduction.
it's a really long agenda.
Yeah, 5 minutes, not even.
And if anybody wants to hear it, they can watch this tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, just an introduction.
Yeah, I didn't know what to prepare for, so.
Okay.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.